For the third time this week, the HOA president drove straight through my ranch gate and destroyed my sick wife's healing garden. That was the morning I decided it would be the last time. It was 6:30 a.m. in rural Texas. I stood at my kitchen window with a cup of coffee as her white Lexus ripped through my private gate like it was a public road. Tires crushed the bluebonnets my wife planted during chemotherapy. My cattle scattered. Her oxygen machine on the porch suddenly cut out. She never even slowed down. What this HOA Karen didn't know was that I had spent the entire weekend installing solid steel bollards right across that driveway. And the very next time she tried to use my land as her shortcut, her Lexus never made it through my gate again. What would you do if someone kept driving through your dying wife's sanctuary? My name's Clayton Rivers. I'm 58 years old, retired after 28 years in the Marines where I specialized in hydraulic systems on aircraft carriers. Now I tend cattle and care for my wife Sarah, who's fighting stage 3 breast cancer on our little piece of heaven in East Texas. We bought this ranch 5 years ago when Sarah got her diagnosis. The doctors said stress was her enemy, so we found 200 acres of rolling pasture with a creek running through it. Sarah fell in love with the idea of creating a butterfly sanctuary, native Texas wildflowers that would attract monarchs during their migration. On her good days between chemo sessions, she'd sit on our wraparound porch, oxygen tank beside her chair, watching those orange and black wings dance through her garden. The ranch sits about 2 miles outside the city limits, surrounded by open land in one fancy subdivision called Meadowbrook Heights. 200 homes, all beige stucco with red tile roofs, where the HOA makes sure every mailbox is exactly the same shade of forest green. Our trouble started 3 months ago with Brenda Winchester, 52 years old, pharmaceutical sales manager, and the iron-fisted president of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA. This woman drives a white Lexus GX 470 with a blessed vanity plate and enough live, laugh, love bumper stickers to make you nauseous. One morning, I'm checking fence posts when I hear this ATV engine coming across my property. I follow the sound and find Brenda Winchester measuring my gate with a tape measure. She's wearing a navy business suit and high heels, completely out of place on a cattle ranch. "Ma'am, this is private property," I tell her, keeping my voice calm like the Marines taught me. "Could you please use the public access road?" She looks at me like I just asked her to eat dirt. "I've been using this road since before you moved here. There's a historical right-of-way to our water pump station. Deal with it." Now, I've dealt with roadside bombs in Afghanistan and drunk sailors on shore leave, but nothing prepared me for the pure entitlement in this woman's voice. She climbs back on her ATV and roars off toward the subdivision, leaving deep ruts in Sarah's carefully maintained gravel path. The smell of diesel exhaust hung in the air long after she disappeared. I walked back to the house where Sarah was sitting on the porch, watching a monarch butterfly that had landed on her honeysuckle vine. "Who was that, honey?" she asked, her voice weak from yesterday's chemo session. "Nobody important," I said, but my hands were already shaking. Not from fear, from barely controlled rage. In the military, we called it seeing red. When someone threatens what you're sworn to protect, every instinct screams to eliminate the threat. But this wasn't Afghanistan. This was Texas, where we settle things legally, usually. Over the next few weeks, Brenda escalated from ATV to SUV, claiming she needed efficiency to check the subdivision's water pump station. Every morning at exactly 7:15, that white Lexus would come tearing through my gate, past my house, through Sarah's garden, kicking up gravel and dust. The cattle learned to scatter when they heard her coming. Thunder, my prize Angus bull, jumped a fence section trying to get away and gashed his leg on the barbed wire. $800 in veterinary bills and scattered feed later, I was starting to understand this wasn't about water pumps. This was about control, about showing the locals who really runs things around here. Sarah stopped sitting on the porch during her treatments. "I feel like we're living in a fishbowl, honey," she told me one evening, tears in her eyes as she watched her trampled flowers. That night, I made myself a promise. Sarah's sanctuary was going to stay sacred, no matter what it cost me. 3 weeks into Brenda's daily invasions, she decided to up the ante. Every Tuesday became HOA inspection day, where she'd bring the entire board through my gate for what she called community tours. Picture this: 5 vehicles, 12 people, treating my ranch like it's some kind of public park. They'd climb out of their SUVs in their subdivision uniforms, khaki pants, polo shirts, and that special kind of confidence that comes from never being told no in your life. I watched from my kitchen window as Brenda led them around my property with a clipboard, pointing at fence posts and taking measurements like she was planning renovations. The group included the HOA treasurer, a nervous little man who kept glancing at his phone, and the vice president, a woman who wore sunglasses indoors and carried a purse that cost more than my truck payment. This area would be perfect for the community gazebo, I heard Brenda tell them, standing in the middle of Sarah's butterfly garden. She was wearing designer boots that probably cost more than most people's rent, crushing delicate Indian paintbrush under her heels. The tours weren't just disruptive, they were dangerous. 12 people tramping around a working cattle ranch, leaving gates open, making noise, spooking animals that outweigh them by 1,000 pounds. My cattle scattered across all 200 acres, breaking through fence sections and mixing up the herds I'd spent months organizing. Thunder, my prize Angus bull, panicked during one of these inspections and crashed through a corner post trying to escape. The barbed wire caught his left hind leg, opening a gash that required 47 stitches and 3 weeks of antibiotics. Dr. Martinez, our large animal vet, shook his head as he sutured the wound. These animals don't understand tourists, Clayton. Next time might be worse. But the worst part was watching Sarah. My wife, who'd found peace in this place during the hardest fight of her life, started flinching every time she heard car doors slamming in our driveway. Her oncologist noticed the stress affecting her treatment response. Blood pressure up, white cell count down, sleep patterns disrupted. I had to do something, but I needed evidence. So I went shopping. Military training teaches you that intelligence wins wars, not firepower. I spent $800 at the electronics store on 6 trail cameras with motion sensors, the same passive infrared technology we used for perimeter security overseas. I positioned them with overlapping coverage zones, concealed in fence posts and tree branches, creating a surveillance net that would make the Pentagon proud. The cameras revealed something interesting. Brenda wasn't just bringing HOA members through my property, she was charging them. I caught her on video collecting $50 bills from neighbors who wanted to experience what she advertised on the Meadowbrook Heights Facebook page as Authentic Texas Ranch Tours. Here's a knowledge nugget for you. Trail cameras use passive infrared sensors that detect heat signatures from up to 40 feet away. They're motion-activated, weatherproof, and can run for 6 months on lithium batteries. Same technology the military uses, but you can buy them at any sporting goods store. Translation: you can document trespassing professionally without spending a fortune. But catching Brenda in the act wasn't a deterrent. It was just intelligence gathering. She spotted my cameras on her 3rd tour and actually smiled and waved at them. "Can't stop me from using my road," she called out, like she was daring me to try. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing the footage on my laptop. 47 separate trespassing incidents in 3 weeks, each one time-stamped and GPS tagged. I cross-referenced the dates with HOA meeting minutes that Brenda posted online, looking for patterns. The pattern was chilling. Every ranch tour happened exactly 1 day before HOA votes on rural property concerns. She was using my land to build political support for whatever scheme she had planned next. I called my Marine buddy Jake, who'd become a lawyer after his discharge. He reviewed the video footage and whistled low. "Clayton, this is clear criminal trespassing with commercial intent, but proving she's charging for access to your property requires more documentation." "What kind of documentation?" "Financial records, advertising materials, witness statements. Build a case that shows pattern and intent." That night, Sarah found the energy to plant a new section of her butterfly garden, zinnias and cosmos that would bloom in late summer. She worked slowly, stopping frequently to rest, but her eyes had that determined sparkle I'd fallen in love with 28 years ago. "No one drives through your flowers again," I promised her. "I know, honey. I trust you." But trust wasn't going to be enough. This was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, Brenda made her boldest move yet. She filed an official claim with the county for a right-of-way easement on my property and announced plans to install an HOA security booth right next to my gate. The letter from county planning hit my mailbox like a legal grenade. Notice of easement claim hearing, Meadowbrook Heights HOA versus Rivers Ranch property. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday at 2 p.m. "Community safety requires monitoring rural activities," Brenda explained to the local newspaper. "We need to ensure agricultural operations don't impact our neighborhood's property values. The immediate impact was devastating. My bank received a county inquiry about property boundaries and promptly froze my equity line of credit. Sarah's medical bills were stacking up, and we'd been counting on that credit to cover her treatments. The insurance company launched their own investigation into alleged commercial use of our ranch, threatening to void our homeowner's policy. Neighbors started asking questions. "Is it true you're running some kind of business out there, Clayton?" The doubt in their voices cut deeper than Brenda's lies. I couldn't sleep that night, lying next to Sarah in our bed, listening to her oxygen concentrator cycling on and off. My hands were shaking again, the first time since Afghanistan. This wasn't combat, but it felt like war. The next morning, I hired a professional surveyor and drove to the county courthouse. If Brenda wanted to play legal games, I'd show her what 28 years of military precision looked like applied to civilian problems. The surveyor, a grizzled old-timer named Pete, used GPS equipment accurate to within 2 inches, the same satellite technology that guided artillery strikes overseas. "This is military-grade surveying, Clayton. We'll know exactly where every boundary line runs." Here's something most people don't know. Professional survey equipment uses the same GPS satellite constellation as military targeting systems. It can pinpoint property boundaries with surgical precision, and those measurements hold up in any court. Translation: when someone claims your land, get it surveyed professionally. Emotions don't win property disputes, documentation does. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disappointment. I spent 6 hours in the basement records room, photographing decades of property deeds and easement documents. Military training kicked in, systematic intelligence gathering, pattern recognition, attention to detail. What I found made my blood run cold. There were no historical easements on my property. None. The previous owner had never granted access rights to anyone. That road existed because it was convenient, not because it was legal. But here's the mini twist. The survey revealed something Brenda didn't expect. Her precious HOA water line was illegally crossing 3 other properties besides mine. For 15 years, she'd been trespassing on multiple ranches, not just mine. I drove straight to my neighbors. Tom Henderson, who ran cattle on the section north of me. Maria Santos, whose family had owned their land for 4 generations. Bill Crawford, a retired teacher who raised quarter horses. "You're telling me this HOA line crosses my property without permission?" Tom asked, studying the survey maps spread across his kitchen table. 15 years of illegal trespassing, I confirmed. "And I bet you never saw a penny in compensation." That's when the real story emerged. Brenda had been systematically intimidating all the rural property owners, threatening lawsuits, filing nuisance complaints, creating paper trails to justify her enforcement actions. She wasn't just targeting me, she was running a campaign against anyone who didn't fit her suburban vision. The county planning meeting was held in a sterile conference room with fluorescent lights that hummed like angry wasps. Brenda arrived in her Navy business suit, carrying a leather portfolio and radiating the confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight. I came in my cleanest jeans, carrying a banker's box full of documentation. "Mr. Rivers," the planning director said, "Mrs. Winchester claims historical usage rights to access community water infrastructure." I opened my box. "Sir, I've got 40 years of property records, professional survey documentation, and evidence that no such easement has ever existed. Furthermore, I can prove the HOA's water system is illegally crossing multiple private properties without compensation or permission." Brenda's face went white. That's impossible. We have documentation." "Ma'am, I'd be very interested to see that documentation." The planning director leaned forward. "Mrs. Winchester, do you have legal easement documents for the property access you're claiming?" I watched her squirm for 30 seconds of beautiful silence before she said, "I'll need to consult with our attorney." "Then this hearing is postponed pending documentation review," the director said. As we filed out of the room, the planning director pulled me aside. "Off the record, Mr. Rivers. Her claim has no merit, but she's got political connections. Document everything." That night, Sarah was strong enough to sit on the porch. We watched a pair of monarch butterflies dancing around her zinnia patch as the sun set behind our pastures. "How'd it go today?" she asked. "We're winning," I said, "but this isn't over." Brenda Winchester didn't take losing gracefully. 2 days after the county meeting, she filed a formal nuisance complaint against our ranch, demanding what she called agricultural modernization and threatening daily fines of $500 until we complied with her undefined standards. The complaint was 12 pages of legal gibberish that basically boiled down to, "This cattle ranch makes our neighborhood look bad, so shut it down." She claimed our livestock operations violated health codes, our structures needed inspection, and our property was reducing home values in Meadowbrook Heights by an average of $15,000 per house. The county inspector showed up the next Tuesday morning in a white pickup truck with official plates. His name was Rodriguez, and he looked like a man who'd rather be fishing than dealing with HOA drama. "Mr. Rivers, I've got to investigate this complaint, but between you and me, it looks like bureaucratic harassment. Your operation is cleaner than most facilities I inspect." Still, he had to follow protocol. 3 hours of walking my property, checking feed storage, water systems, and waste management. Everything passed, but the stress was eating Sarah alive. She collapsed during her chemo session that Thursday and spent the night in the hospital. I sat in that plastic chair next to her bed, listening to monitors beep and watching IV drips, making a decision that would change everything. The smell of antiseptic couldn't mask the scent of fear in that room. Fear that stress was winning the battle against cancer. That weekend, I drove back to the courthouse. 3 days in the records room, photographing every document I could find. Military intelligence training from Afghanistan, applied to Texas property law. I was looking for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that would explain Brenda's confidence. Here's what most people don't understand about public records. They're public for a reason. Property deeds, permit applications, tax records, it's all there if you know how to look. I spent 72 hours learning the paper trail of my own neighborhood, and that's when I found the smoking gun. The original water easement that Brenda claimed gave her access rights had expired in 1987. Expired, as in no longer valid, no longer legal. The county had sent official notice to the HOA requiring renewal, but nobody ever responded. The legal department assumed compliance and never followed up. For 15 years, Brenda Winchester had been trespassing on my property and 3 others, operating an entire water system on expired permits. She was running a sophisticated criminal enterprise, and she probably didn't even realize it. Here's a knowledge nugget that could save your property. Easements aren't permanent unless specifically written that way. Most utility easements require periodic renewal, and if they expire, the property owner can revoke access. Always check the original documents. Translation: just because someone's been using your land doesn't mean they have the legal right to keep using it. I called my lawyer buddy Jake and read him the findings over the phone. "Clayton, this is bigger than trespassing. Document forgery is a federal crime when it involves property rights. If she's been falsifying easement documents, we're talking fraud charges." I spent the next week gathering evidence from my neighbors. Tom Henderson had his own horror stories. Maria Santos showed me threatening letters about agricultural compliance. Bill Crawford had photographs of Brenda's people measuring his horse pastures without permission. The pattern was undeniable. Brenda wasn't just an entitled HOA president. She was systematically targeting rural property owners to force them into compliance or buyouts. This was economic warfare disguised as community development. My trail cameras captured something interesting during this investigation phase. Brenda's husband, a quiet man who worked for the county water department, came to my gate at midnight on a Wednesday. He stood there for 20 minutes, studying my fence posts and gate structure, taking measurements with a tape measure. The mini twist came the next morning. I was reviewing the footage when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Mr. Rivers, this is David Winchester, Brenda's husband. I need to talk to you." "About what, sir?" "About documents my wife has been creating. I think you should know what you're really dealing with." We met at a diner in town, away from both our neighborhoods. David Winchester looked like a man carrying a heavy burden. He slid a manila folder across the table. "These are copies of the original easement documents from 1987, the real ones. What Brenda's been showing the county, those aren't legitimate." Yo. Inside the folder were photocopies of the actual expired easement, the county's renewal notice, and something that made my coffee taste like ash. Forged documents with signatures, notary stamps, and county seals that had been created sometime in 2005. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because what she's doing isn't just wrong, it's criminal, and I won't be part of it anymore." That night, Sarah was strong enough to plant bulbs for next spring's flowers. As we worked together,